So my name is Madeleine. I'm a senior. I'm a history major and a Civil War era studies and public history minor, and I am from Morristown, New Jersey. So my artifact is a small tin cup. It's a little tin cup. It's about the size of my palm, and it has a little lid. And on the bottom of it is etched 1863, Gettysburg, July 1st through 4th, 1913. And it belonged to Private Lewis W. Tway, who was in the 147th New York Volunteers. And it's really interesting because when I first saw the artifact, I was looking at a photo of it online in Special Collections online database, and I thought it was like an actual cup. But when you go and see it in person, it's the size of your hand. So clearly it's not practical. I mean, he wouldn't have been drinking out of it. And when you actually look at the artifact, it is in such good condition. You know, there's no patina, no rust, no anything. So it's like, okay, this is obviously something that he purchased as a souvenir. And so that was sort of the thought line I began to go off of, you know, when I was doing my research about him and research about his regiment and the artifact. I guess I think it's a little mysterious. Like, there's definitely, I know a lot about it, but I also would like to know more, which I feel like is, you know, how it is for every Civil War artifact. But it's like, I know, you know, I have a hunch that it's a souvenir, and obviously he's not, you know, drinking his coffee out of it. But I'd love to know if he actually got it, because he attended the Gettysburg Reunion in 1913. It's the 50th reunion, and he's there with a bunch of other members of his regiment. And so I can presume, you know, maybe he bought it while he was there, maybe he bought it in town, maybe someone was selling it for the express purpose of like, this is a reunion artifact, like reunion souvenir. Because a lot of times, I feel like the most popular reunion souvenir is, you know, you hear the stories of like, oh, these little boys who are running around and trying to sell these veterans the canes that are made out of wood from like Little Round Top, like Culp's Hill, et cetera, et cetera. So I wonder, you know, if maybe that was the case, if it was something he picked up in town, if it was something he brought with him, if it was something that maybe didn't even come to the reunion at all, and he was just like, oh, I guess I'll, you know, etch these, you know, this writing about the reunion into the bottom of the cup. And then also, did he write it? Because I've seen that handwriting, and then I've seen his other handwriting, because his collection is just full of like Civil War mementos. So he's got like an ink bottle that he wrote his name on, like, oh, I carried this throughout the war. He has a pocket Bible, which he writes his name in the front cover. I mean, he has a diary, he has letters, I believe. And so I've compared the handwriting of the two, and it looks similar, but I feel like I can never be quite certain about handwriting, if it's actually the same or not. So I guess those are the big mysteries surrounding that. And then also, I guess, you know, maybe why was he at the reunion? Because he actually didn't fight at the Battle of Gettysburg. So he musters in maybe 10, 15 days after the end of the Battle of Gettysburg. The 147th New York Volunteers, when they're at Gettysburg, that's really their first major engagement, besides they were at Chancellorsville, but they're there as reserves, so they're, you know, they're not really doing anything. So July 1st, they're in the railroad cut, and they suffer these massive casualties. I mean, it's like they lose something like 300 out of 380 men. So it's this massive event, you know, for this regiment. It's something that's really traumatic, and it also means, you know, you have a massive shakeup of the regiment. You have people moving around, you know, you have officers killed, you know, people need to fill that spot, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have new guys, you know, like Tway, who are coming in. And so I think, you know, it becomes something of like, he must have really had to identify with this event, you know, despite not fighting there, it was something that was really major for his regiment. You know, when he joined, that must have been his way of connecting with these other guys who have been there, who have experienced combat, you know, listening to them talk about what happened, listening to them talk about fallen comrades. So maybe that was his way of, you know, trying to be more of a cohesive part of the group, but wanted to be there, you know, with these other veterans who did, you know, with their comrades who they knew, just so you can reconnect and you can be with people who understand you. So I guess maybe mystery, like there's a lot of little things I wish I could sit, you know, Lewis Tway down and ask him, hey, where did you get this? There's been souvenirs since like the very beginning. I mean, there's been souvenirs, like Gettysburg souvenirs, since July 4th, 1863. There's people who are going out on the battlefield and, you know, picking up rifles and stuff. I don't think I ever thought that much about actually who's coming to these reunions before and why are they coming, what are they doing there. I was just like, oh, well, it's a reunion. You know, they're all hanging out with their buddies. But I don't know, I think it's really interesting that he was there. I think it's really interesting, maybe, you know, if this is a souvenir that he got there. I mean, what does that say about what they're trying to remember about the Civil War? I mean, obviously, you know, it's a cup. It's not, you know, like a sword or a gun or something, you know, something that makes you think of the fighting or makes you think of the sectional tension, or, you know, other sort of the like difficult parts of the war. You know, you can see this cup and you can think, oh, you know, this reminds me of when I was drinking coffee with my buddies, like in camp. At this reunion, you know, especially 1913, reconciliation has been going on for, you know, how many decades now? I mean, they're trying to move past this feeling of, you know, sectional strife, of, you know, you guys are fighting for slavery and that's bad. And so I think they're making the active choice not to remember these more difficult parts of the war. They're saying, I'm just going to remember, you know, hanging out with my buddies, you know. I can't remember if it's 1913 or one of the later reunions, they have the photo of the Union veteran and the Confederate veteran shaking hands over the stone wall. And again, it papers over, you know, what really happened, what's really going on. And, you know, if you smooth those things over, you can kind of look past or avert your eyes from what's happening in that time period, especially with Jim Crow in the South and, you know, all the terrible things that are happening there. And I guess that really, it made me think more, at least, you know, what are the implications of these reunions? Like, yes, it's an opportunity for these guys to like get together with their buddies, but it's also like, okay, then what does that say about the country and where they're at, you know, at the time in terms of remembering the Civil War, and also how does that affect their day-to-day? It says something that it's stayed in the family for so long, and, you know, was able to speak to, I guess, not only, you know, Tway's experience when he's alive, but also his descendants are connecting with this too, and that's their tangible connection, not only with the Civil War, but sort of this like imagined community of like, you know, descendants and people, you know, oh, my dad fought here, my grandfather fought here. I think that's another interesting element that I guess we don't think about, is it's like, after these guys are gone, you know, what do these souvenirs, what do these artifacts mean to their families? And I guess that's, again, this tangible connection to this larger traumatic event that maybe they hadn't gone through, but, you know, it's part of their family history now. You know what it says? It says you can't just look at everything online and assume that's what it is, because you actually have to go in person and look at this stuff. Because it's like, it might look like the real thing online, but I went in person. It's like, it's teeny tiny. And I guess, I mean, you know, in a silly way, it's like, shows the importance of actually getting into the archives and looking at the object. I mean, it's one thing to look at a photo of it online. It's another thing to hold it in your hands and be like, okay, yeah, I actually get it now. Like, you know, this isn't a real cup, it's a souvenir cup.